Confusion or merger of rights. Article 1275 to 1277. Confusion of merger of rights occurs when the rules of debtor and creditor are held by the same person. This legal context is outlined in the Article 1275 to 1277 of the Civil Code of the Philippines and leads to the extinguishment of the obligation. Confusion happens when a single person becomes both the debtor and the creditor in the same obligation. For example, if person A owes money to person B and the person B inherits the debt from person A, the obligation is extinguished because the rules have merged. Effect of confusion. When confusion occurs, the obligation is extinguished. The debtor is no longer required to fulfill the obligation because they are now both the one who owes and the one who owns. The two requirements for confusion. First, same person. The same individual must hold both the rights of the creditor and the obligation of the debtor. Second, same obligation. The confusion must pertain to the same obligation. If there are multiple debts or obligation, the merger must apply to the specific one in question. Confusion does not apply if the obligation is not fully extinguished. For example, if a creditor owes multiple creditors and one creditor becomes the debtor, the obligation to the other creditors remain intact. If the obligation is conditional or subject to a term, confusion may not extinguish the obligation until the condition is met or the term expires. For example, if Maria owes 10,000 to Juan and Juan later become Maria's heir, the debt is extinguished because Juan is the heir that holds both the creditor and debtor's rights. Conclusion. Confusion or merger of rights is a legal principle that leads to the extinguishment of an obligation when the debtor and creditor are the same person. Understanding the concept is important for recognizing how obligation can be affected by changes in the parties involved.
What is a compensation? A compensation, according to Article 1278 to 1283, occurs when two parties are mutually creditors and debtors of each other. This means that each party owes a certain amount to the other, and instead of making separate payments, they can offset their debts against each other. The obligations are extinguished to the extent of the lesser amount owed. There are key features of compensation. First is mutuality. Both parties must be creditors and debtors. For example, if a person A owed person B 5,000 pesos, then a person B owes person A 3,000 pesos, they can use compensation to settle their debts. Second is liquidated debts. The debts must be certain and fixed amounts. This means that the amounts owed should not be in disputes or contingent on future events. For example, if this is when Mark borrows 10,000 pesos from his friend John, the amount is clear and fixed, and both parties agree on it. This is a liquidated debt. Third is same kind of obligation. The obligation must be on the same nature. For instance, if one debt is for money, then the other must also be for money. For example, if this is when Andrea owes 5,000 pesos to Brian and Brian owes 5,000 pesos to Andrea, both making them the same kind of obligation. On the other hand, if Andrea owes Brian 5,000 pesos but Brian owes Andrea a laptop, they are not the same kind of obligation, as one is for money and the other is for a physical item. Fourth is no legal prohibition. No legal prohibition, compensation cannot occur if there is a legal restriction against it, such as in cases where one of the debt is not transferable or is subject to a specific legal condition. In conclusion, compensation is a legal mechanism that allows two parties who are mutually creditors and debtors to offset their debts against each other. This process simplifies transaction, promotes efficiency, and provides clear legal framework for resolving financial obligations. Understanding compensation Compensation is essential for individuals and businesses engaged in financial dealings.
Novation in Articles 1921 to 1904. Novation is the legal process of substituting an old obligation with new one. This means that the original obligation is extinguished and new obligation is created, which may involve the same parties or new parties. Novation can occur in various forms, such as changing the terms of obligation, the subject matter, or the parties involved. Key features of novation. Number one, the substitution of obligations. Novation replaces an existing obligation with a new one. The original obligation ceases to exist and the new obligation takes its place. Number two, consent of the parties. All parties involved must agree to the novation. This means that the debtor, creditor, and any new parties must consent to the changes being made. Type of novation. There are three types of novation. Number one, change of subject matter. The original obligation is replaced with a new obligation that involves different subject matter. Number two, change of parties. The original obligation is replaced with a new obligation that involves different parties. So, number three, change of term. The terms of the original obligation may be modified, resulting in a new obligation. Example, in an original obligation, Maria borrowed 50,000 from Juan with an agreement to pay it back in full with 1 year at an interest rate of 5%. This creates an obligation for Maria to repay Juan. So number two, novation occurs. So after 6 months, Maria finds herself in a position where she cannot repay the loan as originally agreed. She approaches Juan and proposes a new agreement. They agree that instead of repaying the 50,000 in one lump sum, Maria will now repay the loan in monthly installment of 5,000 over the next 12 months with an interest rate of 3%. So, number three, new obligation. The original loan agreement is extinguished and a new obligation is created. Now, Maria has a new obligation to pay Juan 5,000 monthly for the next 12 months at 3% interest. Both Maria and Juan consent to this new arrangement, which constitute novation. The original terms of the loan are no longer applicable, and the new terms are now in effect. Novation is a vital mechanism that allows parties to adapt their obligation to changing circumstances. By substituting an old obligation with a new one, novation provides flexibility in contractual relationship, ensuring and all parties agree to the new terms and conditions. Understanding novation is essential for individuals and businesses engaged in contractual agreements, as it helps clarify the rights and responsibilities of the parties involved.
Breach of obligation under remedies available under Article 1170 to 1174 of the Civil Code. So, what is a breach of obligation? A breach of obligation occurs when a party fails to fulfill their duty as stipulated in a contract or obligation. This failure can take different forms, which we'll now discuss. So, there are two primary types of breach. Number one, the total breach. Total breach happens when the debtor completely fails to perform the obligation. Example, a construction company enters into a contract to build a house for a client within 6 months. However, after the deadline passes, the company has not started any work and refuses to fulfill the contract. This is a total breach because there was no performance at all. So number 2, partial breach. This occurs when the debtor either fulfills only a portion of the obligation or does not perform it correctly. For example, a supplier agrees to deliver 100 laptops to a business by a specific date. However, on the delivery day, they only provide 60 laptops, with the rest delayed by another month. This is a partial breach because part of the obligation was performed but not entirely or as agreed. So, remedies for obligation. The primary, the primary remedy available for an aggrieved party is the award of damages, which aims to compensate for the losses suffered due to the breach. These damages are categorized as follows. Number 1, the actual damage. This refers to the compensation for direct and probable losses incurred by the aggrieved party. For example, if a supplier fails to deliver goods as agreed and the buyer incurs extra costs to obtain them elsewhere, the additional expenses is considered actual damages. So number 2, consequential damages. These are damages that arise as a foreseeable result of the breach. For instances, if the failure to deliver materials on time causes a construction project to be delayed, the party responsible for the delay may be liable for additional costs incurred due to the postponement. Additional consideration. Article 1171 to 1174 further provides specific guidelines regarding liability for breach, including cases of negligence and fortuitous events. For example, if the breach was due to an unavoidable event beyond human control, such as natural disaster, liability may be waived under certain conditions.
Culpable delay or mora. Culpable delay, also known as mora, refers to the situation where a debtor fails to perform their obligation on time due to their own fault or negligence. This concept is significant in the context of obligations and contracts as it affects the rights and responsibilities of the parties involved. There are two types of mora, mora salvende and mora accipiende. Mora salvende, this refers to the delay of the debtor in performing their obligation. For example, if a contractor fails to complete a construction project by the agreed deadline, they are in mora salvende. Mora accipiende this refers to the delay of the creditor in accepting the performance of the obligation. For instance, if a seller is ready to deliver goods but the buyer refuses to accept them, the buyer is in mora accipiende. Conclusion. Culpable delay mora is an important concept in obligation and contracts, highlighting the responsibilities of debtors to perform their obligation on time. Understanding the implications of culpable delay helps parties navigate their rights and obligations in contractual relationships, ensuring accountability and the potential for remedies in case breach. So, culpable delay mora happens when a party fails to fulfill an obligation on time due to their own fault. It can be mora solvende, debtors delay, the debtor fails to perform on time. Mora accipiende, creditors delay, the creditor refuses to accept performance. So, this concept ensures accountability in contracts, allowing for penalties, damages, or contract termination if a breach occurs.
Fraud and negligence obligations. In the context of obligations and the contract, fraud and negligence are two critical concepts that can affect the performance of obligations and the right of the parties involved. Both can lead to liabilities and potentials for damages. First is fraud or dulo. Fraud or dulo refers to any deceitful practice or misrepresentation made by one party to induce another party to enter into contract or to perform an obligations. It involves intentional wrongdoing with the aim of benefits at the expense of others. Types of fraud. First is actual fraud. This occurs when a party intentionally misrepresents facts or conceals information to deceive another party. Second is constructive fraud. This occurs when a party's actions, though not intentionally deceitful, result in an unfair advantage or harm to another party. Negligence or culpa refers to the failure to exercise the care that reasonably prudent persons would exercise in similar circumstances. It involves a lack of due diligence or care that result in harm or damages in another party. Types of negligence. First is simple negligence.
This occurs when a party fails to act with the level of care that reasonable person would exercise. Second is gross negligence. This refers to the severe degree of negligence that demonstrate a reckless of disregard for the safety or reasonable treatment of others.
Fortuitous events and their effect on obligations. Fortuitous events refer to unforeseen and avoidable occurrences that prevented a party from fulfilling their obligations under a contract. These events are typically beyond the control of the parties involved and can significantly impact the performance of obligation. A fortuitous event is an occurrence that is unforeseen. The event could not have been anticipated by the parties at the time of the contract. Unavoidable. The event could not have been prevented by reasonable means. Example of fortuitous events include natural disasters such as earthquake, floods, or typhoons, acts of war, and other extraordinary circumstances that make it impossible for a party to perform their contractual obligation. Effects of fortuitous events on obligation. Number one is the extinguishment of obligation. If a fortuitous event makes the performance of an obligation impossible, the obligation is extinguished. For example, if a seller is unable to deliver goods due to a natural disaster that destroys the goods, the obligation to deliver is no longer enforceable. Next is the relief from liability. The debtor is relieved from liability for damages if they can prove that the non-performance was due to a fortuitous event. This means they will not be required to compensate the creditor for losses from the inability to perform. In conclusion, fortuitous events play a significant role in the realm of obligations and contract. They provide a legal basis for the extinguishment of obligations and relieve debtors from liability when performance becomes impossible due to unforeseen and unavoidable circumstances. Understanding the implication of fortuitous event is essential for parties engaged in contractual relationships as it helps clarify their rights and responsibilities in the face of unexpected challenges.